Picture a city that shouldn't exist, not the way it exists. Picture 300,000 people packed into a space that maybe, comfortably fits 80,000. Now fill those streets with smoke so thick that on a February morning you can hold your hand in front of your face and watch it disappear at the wrist. Add a river that glows orange from the furnaces, a river so choked with dye works and tanneries and the outflow of 10,000 privies that fish haven't lived in it for 30 years. Add the sound of hammers, not one hammer, not 100. Thousands of hammers, working iron, working steel, working the rivets into the hulls of ships that will sail to every corner of the world. Ships built here, in this impossible place, by men who will be dead of lung disease before they're 50. That's Glasgow, 1872, the second city of the empire, they call it. London first, Glasgow second. And in some ways, Glasgow is more impressive. London grew slowly, spread itself out, over centuries had time to breathe. Glasgow did something different. Glasgow erupted. In 80 years, it went from a modest market town to an industrial monster, a place of such extraordinary productive violence that the whole world bought what it made, while the people who made it lived in conditions that would make a medieval peasant wince. A place where you could walk 15 minutes from a mansion on Buchanan Street, and I mean a proper mansion, columned entrance, servants at every door, hothouse flowers in January, to a single room in the Gorbals where 9 people slept in shifts, because there wasn't floor space for all of them to lie down at once. 15 minutes, same city, different worlds. We're going back there tonight. Not as visitors, not as tourists peering through carriage windows at picturesque poverty. We're going in, all the way in, down the close and up the stair and through the door into the dark. We're living it as a girl. That matters, because the books tend to tell you about the men, the workers, the shipbuilders, the radical reformers standing on street corners in the rain. The women and the children who kept those men alive, fed, clothed, who hauled the water and minded the sick and made something out of nothing week after week in rooms so damp the wallpaper peeled off by November. They're harder to find in the histories, so we're going to find them tonight. I make these sleep histories, and honestly, I genuinely do not know whether you fall asleep to them or whether you just lie there fully awake absorbing Victorian public health disasters as a personality trait. Either way, you're here and I'm not judging, and this one gets heavy in places, so get comfortable, get warm. Genuinely, actually warm, because you're about to spend a while somewhere that isn't, and let's go. Here we go. Your eyes open before the light does. That's the thing about this room. There's the sequence. Eyes first, then maybe half a second. Later, consciousness. The slow crashing return of knowing where you are and what day it is and what has to be done. And then, before any of that fully settles, the smell. It comes in layers, and you've learned, over 12 years of mornings in this room, to read each one the way a sailor reads weather. First layer, damp, cold, mineral damp, the kind that lives in walls rather than air. The kind that isn't wet exactly, but isn't dry either. It's in the plaster. It's in the wood of the window frame. It's in the blanket you're sleeping under, which is never quite dry, hasn't been fully dry since October, and won't be again until May, if then. The damp has a smell that's close to soil, close to mushrooms, close to something old and settling. You don't notice it most days, but on mornings when you wake before moving, in that half second before your body warms the air around it, it's the first thing, always. Second layer, coal smoke. From downstairs, from the flats on either side, from the chimney 3 closes over that hasn't drawn properly since some boy threw a brick down it 2 years ago. The smoke doesn't clear overnight, it settles. By morning it's soft and heavy, the way smoke gets when it's been sitting still for hours, and it catches at the back of your throat before you've taken a second breath. Third layer, the bed itself. You're sleeping with your sister Agnes, who is 8, and the smell of a child who has been feverish for 4 days is something particular. Sweet and wrong. The way fruit goes wrong rather than sour. You know that smell now. The whole family knows it. Nobody talks about knowing it. Fourth layer, underneath everything else, rising from the clothes below, from the court behind the building, from the shared privy that 15 families use and that the landlord's man empties on a good week, every Thursday. The baseline smell of too many people in too small a space. The accumulated biological reality of poverty that no amount of scrubbing entirely removes, and underneath that, barely there, almost imagined, a thread of something warm. Your mother's shawl hanging by the range which still holds the ghost of the fire from last night. The fire that's long out now. You are Morag Dunbar. You are 12 years old. Welcome to Glasgow in the year 1872. The room is dark, but not completely. A grey bar of light sits along the bottom of the curtain. And when I say curtain, I mean a piece of sacking your mother nailed across the window 2 winters ago because the glass in the bottom pane cracked, and the landlord never sent anyone to fix it, and the wind coming off the Clyde in January will take your fingers if you let it. The grey bar means it's close to 5, maybe just past. You need to get up, not want, need. The water needs fetching before the queue builds at the standpipe. The fire needs laying and lighting, so the kitchen, and when I say kitchen I mean the other half of this room, the half with the range, so the kitchen's warm enough for your mother to wash Agnes down before she starts the day's work. The bread needs cutting, if there's bread. You need to check whether there's bread. There was yesterday. Whether there still is depends on whether your brother Tam came home last night, or whether he spent what he earned on something that wasn't bread. You slide out from under the blanket slowly, carefully, keeping the cold from rushing in under the covers around Agnes. She's asleep. Her breathing is loud, slightly wet, the way it's been since Monday. The floor is bare wood. Some boards have gaps between them, and the air that comes up through those gaps is the coldest thing in the room. You find your stockings by feel in the dark, sitting on the edge of the bed with your feet hovering an inch above the floor while you pull them on. Then your shoes unlaced, just shoved on. Speed over dignity. The floor can wait 15 seconds. Your dress is on the hook behind the door. Your apron. Your shawl, which is your mother's old one, handed down when she got the new one from the church jumble. The new one isn't much newer, but it has fewer holes. You dress in the dark. You've been dressing in the dark for as long as you can remember. You do it the way you do everything that has to be done before the day's properly started. Quickly, without fuss, with the specific efficiency of someone who has calculated exactly how many steps are between them and the thing they need to accomplish. Agnes stirs, makes a small sound. You wait, not moving, not making the floorboard creak. She settles. You ease open the door. The close is darker than the room. The close is what you call the entrance passage of the building. The hallway, if hallway's a word that fits a stone-floored tunnel barely 4 feet wide, lit by a single gas jet on each landing that the landlord sometimes fills and sometimes doesn't. Tonight he hasn't. The gas jet on your landing is dead. The hot on the landing above flickers uncertainly. Enough to show you the stairs, but barely. You know these stairs anyway. 14 steps from your landing down to the ground. You've counted them since you were 5. The 4th step from the top has a loose edge that catches your heel if you're not careful. The 8th step is fine. The 12th step on the left side is slightly higher than the others, maybe 3/4 of an inch, enough to trip you if you're carrying something and you're tired. You've tripped on the 12th step 7 times. The 7th time you were carrying a full pail of water and you spilled it all and had to go back to the standpipe, and by the time you got back, Mrs. Malone from the ground floor had taken the last of the queue's water for the morning, and you had to wait, and the fire didn't get lit until nearly 7, and your mother looked at you with that specific expression that isn't anger, but is somehow worse than anger. You don't trip on the 12th step anymore. Down the close and out into the court. The court is the open space, the word open doing a lot of work here, at the back of the building, bounded on 3 sides by other tenement blocks, on the 4th by a wall with broken glass set into the top. It's maybe 30 feet by 20. The sky, when you can see it, is a rectangle of dark grey above you, slightly lighter than the surrounding stone. The privy is in the far corner. The smell hits you at about 15 feet. You've known this smell your whole life too. You don't hold your breath anymore. There's no point. You just move quickly, do what needs doing, and come out again. The standpipe is in the court of the next building over, through an archway in the shared wall. 3 families are already there. Mrs. Gillies from the top floor, who is 42 and looks 60, with a face that has the set expression of someone who gave up being surprised by hardship approximately 20 years ago. A girl you don't know well, from the new family that moved in after the Pattersons left. Something happened with the Pattersons, but no one said clearly what. And an old man, Mr. Heron, whose wife died in August and who's been fetching his own water ever since, because his daughters both married and moved to Partick, and they come when they can, which isn't as often as they should. The queue is simple. You take your place. Nobody speaks much at 5 in the morning. There's a kind of etiquette to early morning water fetching. You nod, you wait, you don't rush the person ahead of you. You make the necessary small motions of acknowledgement that mean I see you. You see me. We're both doing what has to be done, and you leave it at that. Mrs. Gillies looks at you. Her eyes go to your face in the grey light. Agnes any better? About the same. She nods. Makes a sound that could mean several things. Sympathy, or the recognition of what about the same means, or just the acknowledgement that these are the words people use when the answer is actually no. You fill your pail. 2 pails, actually, one for drinking and cooking, one for washing. The standpipe comes from the city water mains, laid down in 1859 by the City Improvement Works, and the water it gives you is genuinely clean, cleaner than it's ever been in Glasgow's history. This is a relatively recent miracle. 10 years ago, before the new mains, you'd have been drawing from a well in the court, and the well in the court shared its ground with the privy, and you understand the mathematics of that situation without me explaining it. The pails are heavy. Each one is maybe 8-9 pounds of water. Carrying 2 means 17-18 pounds held in each hand, your arms slightly out from your body, finding the balance. You've been carrying pails like this since you were 9, and the muscle in your right shoulder has a specific hardness to it now, a kind of permanent tightness that your left shoulder doesn't have because your right arm is stronger and takes more of the weight without you quite meaning it to. You carry them back through the arch, across the court, into the close, up the stairs. 12 steps, 12th step, right side. Fine. Back into the flat. The flat is a room and a kitchen. That's the standard Glasgow tenement configuration. Room and kitchen. The kitchen has the range, the table, 2 chairs, the shelf where the food is kept, a hook for coats, and the box bed built into the wall behind a curtain where your parents sleep. The room has the bed where you and Agnes sleep, and until February it had the bed where Tam and your younger brother Davy slept too. But in February Davy got the fever, different from Agnes's fever, quicker, more violent. And by the 2nd Tuesday in March, Davy was in the Western Infirmary, and by the 4th Tuesday in March, Davy was in the necropolis. He was 6. Nobody's moved the bed. It's still in the corner of the room with its mattress and its folded blanket. Agnes sleeps as far from it as she can and pretends not to look at it. Your mother is already up. She's at the range, not yet lit, going through the motions of laying it with the specific careful economy of someone who is measuring the coal. There are maybe 3 days' worth left in the bucket. Coal costs. Everything costs. The arithmetic of the household runs in your mother's head at all hours. She's told you this once, on a night when she was tired enough to say something true. I count in my sleep. I add numbers while I'm dreaming and wake up knowing exactly what we can't afford. Water's in, you say. Good girl. She doesn't look up from the range. Her hands are red, the knuckles cracked and white at the joints, the way they get in cold weather. She washes other people's clothes for money, takes in laundry from households up near Pollokshields and Langside, households that have servants but not enough servants, or servants who are above certain kinds of work. The laundry comes down to your kitchen, is washed in your range's boiled water, is wrung through the mangle in the court, is hung wherever hanging is possible, is ironed with the flat iron heated on the range, and goes back up to Pollokshields smelling of clean and starch and effort, looking like it was done by someone with a proper washhouse and proper equipment. The payment is not generous, but it is regular, which in this city, in this year, in this close is worth more than generous. Agnes? She was sleeping when I came out. Your mother nods. A small motion, quick, with the quality of something decided rather than relieved. She's been doing that since Monday, making quick, quiet decisions with her face rather than saying the words. You don't ask what the decisions are, you start cutting the bread. There is bread, half a loaf from yesterday, slightly stiff at the cut end where it's been sitting uncovered. You cut thin, thinner than you'd like. You cut 4 slices, which is breakfast for 4. You, your mother, Agnes if she can eat, Tam if Tam came home. You've learned not to cut for certain until you know, but you cut Tam's anyway because not cutting it seems like bad luck. Tam came home. You can hear him through the curtain at the box bed, his breathing under your parents. He smells of the yard and of something else, not whiskey, not exactly, something cheaper. Your father is not at home. This is not unusual. Your father works the early shift at the Fairfield shipyard in Govan, which means he's up at 4 and walking by 1:15, and by the time you're cutting bread, he's already on the south side of the river, somewhere in the grey morning noise of iron and cold, doing a thing with his hands that he's done for 15 years, a thing that has made his hearing worse each year and his cough worse each winter, a thing that pays enough to keep the family's arithmetic from collapsing entirely, though not enough to make the arithmetic comfortable. He's 38 years old and looks 50. This is normal. In the Gorbals in 1872, this is completely, entirely depressingly normal. Let me tell you something about the clothes you live in. 37 people. That's how many people live in this close. This one building, this one stair, 4 floors, 8 flats. 37 people sharing one standpipe, One privy in the court, one section of washing line. This is not the worst close on the street. 3 closes down, they're at 50. The street is Bernard Street off the Salt Market in the neighbourhood called the Gorbals, which is technically south of the Clyde but is very much Glasgow. Glasgow in its most concentrated, most volatile, most living form. The Gorbals in 1872 is a place of such density that the City Improvement Commission, when they send their men around to count and measure, come back with numbers that seem like errors and turn out to be accurate. 750 people per acre in some parts. Picture an acre, a reasonable-sized garden, a small park, something you could walk across in a minute. 750 people, their beds, their cooking fires, their children, their illnesses, their noise, all of it pressing down into the same patch of wet Glasgow earth. The Gorbals wasn't always like this. 60 years ago it was a pleasant enough suburb, a few grand houses, some market gardens, a reputation for a decent air compared to the old city centre. Then the city started eating itself, expanding outward, and the grand houses got divided, then divided again, and the market gardens became courts, and the courts became closes, and the closes filled with people coming in from the Highlands after the clearances, people coming over from Ireland after the famine, people coming from everywhere that was worse than here, which, in the 1840s and 1850s, was a significant list of places. The clearances alone. You've heard your grandmother talk about the clearances in the years before she died. She was from Sutherland, from a township that doesn't exist anymore, from a world of peat fire and Gaelic and land that had been worked by her family for generations, until the landlord decided sheep were more profitable than people, and sent in the men with the torches. She walked to Glasgow with a husband and 2 children, including your mother. She arrived speaking no English, with nothing except what she'd carried. She died in this close, in the flat below yours, in 1867. She never went back north. These are the things that made the Gorbals what it is. Not laziness, not failure, not any of the things the respectable newspapers say when they bother to look in this direction. Just the grinding arithmetic of a century that moved people like pieces on a board and then forgot to move them back. Agnes is awake when you bring the bread. She's sitting up in bed, back against the wall, with a look on her face that you know well. The look of someone who has been awake for but didn't want to call out. Agnes is 8 years old and she has her father's eyes, and she has the specific kind of pride that comes from growing up in a family where calling out when something's wrong feels like adding to the problem. "Morning," you say. "Morning." Her voice is rough, thickened with the night. You feel her forehead with the back of your hand, the way your mother does it. The back of the hand is more sensitive than the palm, your mother says. You can tell more with the back. Agnes's forehead is warm, warmer than it should be, but not the scorching hot Tuesday, not the dry burning heat that made you think of. You don't finish the thought. Hungry? A small pause. A bit. That's better. On Monday she said no to food entirely. Yesterday she ate a few spoonfuls of the thin porridge. A bit is an improvement. You hand her a piece of bread. She eats it slowly, pulling small pieces off with fingers that are too thin, thinner than they were a month ago, the knuckle bones more visible. "Is it raining?" she asks. You cross to the window and look through the piece of sacking at the gap above it. Grey sky, darker grey in the distance. The particular quality of Glasgow cloud that could mean rain in an hour or rain in 5 minutes or rain that is already happening but hasn't quite reached here yet. Not yet, you say, maybe later. Agnes considers this like it matters. Maybe to her it does. Lying in bed sick, the difference between rain and no rain is the difference between a grey wet square of sky through a gap in sacking and a grey dry square. Small distinctions become important when you're confined. "Can I get up today?" she asks. "Ask Mum." "Mum says what you say." This is not entirely true, but is not entirely untrue either. Your mother has put you in charge of Agnes's care in the specific way mothers do when they have 6 other things that absolutely must be done and can't be divided further, and the specific abdication that is really just an act of trust, though it never quite feels that way. It feels like weight. "Maybe this afternoon," you say, "if the fever's down." Agnes accepts this. She finishes the bread. She lies back against the wall with a blanket pulled to her chin, and she looks at the ceiling, and she doesn't look at Davy's bed in the corner. You look at it for her. The morning routine is a machine, and you are one of its parts. Your mother is its engine. You are whatever keeps the engine running while the engine deals with the laundry. The laundry arrives on Mondays and Wednesdays in a basket carried by a boy of about your age, a boy who works for the Hendersons in Langside, who has the specific expression of a person who finds their errand faintly humiliating and compensates by moving very quickly and saying as few words as possible. You've exchanged perhaps 12 words with this boy in the 3 years he's been making these deliveries. You don't know his name, he doesn't know yours. The laundry goes both ways, and that's the extent of the relationship. Today is Thursday, no new laundry. But the pile from Wednesday isn't finished. 2 shirts, a set of table linens, and a petticoat that your mother says is the worst petticoat she's ever seen for starch. The woman must sleep in it. She must roll in sand. All of these need washing and wringing and hanging. You fill the large pot from your morning pails, set it on the range to heat. The fire catches on the 3rd attempt. The damp wood from the box beside the range finally taken after 2 full starts, the smoke gusting back into the kitchen before the chimney draws. Your eyes sting. This is also normal. While the water heats, you check the ranger's coal situation. Your mental note from watching your mother earlier was right. 3 days, maybe less if the temperature drops. You write this on the back of your hand in the particular way you've developed. A small mark. Only you know what it means. Coal, tel dar, the washboard, lives against the wall under the shelf. It's wooden, with the ridged zinc face. Bought second-hand from a woman 2 streets over who was selling everything before she moved to her sister's in Dundee. The zinc face is worn in the middle, where 1,000 shirts have been scrubbed against it, smoothed to a slightly different texture than the edges, and when you run your fingers across it, you can feel exactly where the work has been concentrated, the years of effort recorded in metal. Your mother comes in from the room. She looks at Agnes's door, looks at you. "Porridge for her," she says, "if she'll take it, and see if the cough's worse." "Cough's about the same." Your mother does the thing with her face again. "I'll be out for a few hours," she says. "Back by noon. Mrs. Gilly said she'd look in if you need." "I know." She puts on her good shawl, the one from the church jumble, the one with fewer holes, and wraps it twice around her shoulders. She picks up the bundle of finished laundry from the corner. It weighs nearly as much as she does, or seems to. She's 41 years old. She looks fine. She looks like a woman who has made a decision every single day for 20 years to look fine, because the alternative is not looking fine, and the alternative isn't available. She goes. You stir the porridge. The sound of the building coming awake is something you know so well it is almost music. Doors opening and closing on various floors. Two distinct sounds. The upper floor doors, which have iron rings for handles and ring with a specific metallic weight. The lower floor doors, which have proper lever handles and close with a different thunk. The Gallagher children from above. There are 5 of them, running ages 4 to 10, starting up the particular series of percussive sounds that announces they are children who exist without adequate space. The running, the shouting, the bump that is probably the youngest one falling off something he was told not to, climb. A cough from somewhere. Could be the Malone flat on the ground floor, could be the air shaft that runs between your building and the one behind it. Could be one of 100 chests in a 3-block radius that are coughing this morning because this is Glasgow, and coughing in Glasgow in November is so pervasive it functions as a kind of background noise, like traffic, like weather. The porridge is ready. You pour 2 portions, one for Agnes, one for yourself. There's enough for that, just. You take Agnes's through. She's sitting up again, looking more alert. The difference between Agnes asleep and Agnes awake is sometimes subtle, but right now it's not. She's got that specific watchfulness about her, that attention, which is her particular quality. Agnes has been paying attention to things since she was old enough to have things to pay attention to. She watches people the way some children watch dogs or fires. She watches you now. How much is left, she asks, looking at the bowl. Enough. Enough for dinner too. There's bread for dinner. Is there? Agnes. She wraps her hands around the bowl. Small hands, the knuckles red from just being in this room, in this cold. They're not cracked yet. Yours are cracked. Have been since October. Can you read to me? She says. You don't have much to read. There's the Bible, which is your father's, and which he keeps on the shelf above the range like a domestic god, referenced rarely but never removed. There's 2 pages of a newspaper from a month ago that you've kept because the paper is still good paper and might be useful for something. And there's the book, the one actual book in the flat, which is a collected edition of Robert Burns that your grandmother brought from Sutherland, and that is your mother's most valuable possession in any sense that matters. I'll read Burns, you say. Agnes settles back and eats her porridge while you find the book. You read the one she likes best, the one about the mouse. Wee, sleek-it, cowering, timorous beastie. Your grandmother taught your mother this poem in Gaelic before she knew it in Scots, and your mother taught you in both, and the Gaelic is mostly gone from you now. The city pulls the Gaelic out of people the way rain pulls salt from stone. But a few phrases remain tucked into specific poems like pressed flowers. Agnes closes her eyes while you read. By the end of the 3rd stanza she's asleep again. You close the book. Hold it for a moment. The cover is worn cloth, the spine faded. The pages inside are thin, the type small, the paper almost translucent with age. Your grandmother's hands held this. Your mother's hands, every version of them from young to current. And now yours, already thickened at the palms, the right shoulder already storing its years of water pails. You put it back. Go and finish the washing. The mangle is in the court, under a lean-to roof that keeps most of the rain off most of the time. You carry the wet shirts down the stairs. Another trip, hands full, the 12th step on the right, and into the court, where the cold hits you differently than inside. Inside the cold is domestic, managed, the managed cold of a fire that heats one range in one room. The court cold is outdoor cold, the real Glasgow November cold that comes off the Clyde and settles into stone and doesn't move until April. Your breath shows. The mangle has a wheel on one side and 2 rollers, and the trick with it is the pressure. You set the pressure with the screw at the top, and if you set it too tight, the fabric tears, and if you set it too loose, the water doesn't come out and the linen stays heavy and takes 3 times as long to dry. You've found the setting for the Henderson shirts, 1/4 turn past where it feels right. The Henderson linen runs heavy, good quality, and takes more pressure than cheaper fabric. You know the feel of a shirt being wrung through properly. There's a specific resistance to it. The fabric going through tighter than you'd think possible, coming out on the other side flattened and lightened, the water cascading down into the channel. Your hands on the wheel, turning. The resistance builds, releases, builds again. You do 6 shirts, 2 table linens, the petticoat. The petticoat is everything your mother said it was. By the time you've done the petticoat, your hands are red from the cold and from the pressure of the wheel, and there's a line of soreness along the inside of your palm from the handle. You flex your fingers. The cold makes them slow to respond. Mrs. Gillies appears in the court door. She looks at the mangle, looks at you. Your mum gone out? Yes, Mrs. Gillies. She makes a sound, comes over, takes the other handle of the mangle. Here. 2 people at the mangle is dramatically easier than 1. The shirts go through like paper. Even the petticoat capitulates. Fever any better? Mrs. Gillies asks. Her eyes are on the work. Bit. She nods. Same nod as your mother. The same economy of response to the same information. My Sarah had the fever in September, she says. 4 days it was like walking on glass. And then one morning she woke up and ate half a loaf of bread and I knew she'd turn. You think, Agnes hasn't woken up and eaten half a loaf of bread. You don't say it. I kept Sarah warm, Mrs. Gillies continues. Warm and quiet. No cold air from windows. And I made her drink. Anything. It didn't matter what. Just keep drinking. The fever dries them out from inside. This is useful information offered plainly, from a woman who has managed 4 children through various illnesses in this building, in this city, and has not lost one yet. Which is, in 1872 Glasgow, a kind of miracle small enough to be invisible. Thank you, Mrs. Gillies. Go on, she says, when the last of the ringing is done. Get those up on the line. Winds from the west, they might actually dry. The hanging lines are strung across the court and up to a hook on each building, like a network of aerial geography, a map of who's washing what on which day. The Henderson linens go up white and heavy, pinned properly at the corners, smoothed where you can reach. The shirts go up. The petticoat goes up and immediately catches the west wind and billows out with a kind of dignified outrage, like a duchess who has just been told something she finds unacceptable. You stand in the court for a moment, hands on the line, looking up. The sky above Bernard Street is the grey of iron filings. To the northwest, where the river is, there's a smear of darker grey that might be the smoke from the yards, or might be weather moving in. Somewhere past those buildings, past the salt market, past the high street, past the medieval tangle of the old city, is Glasgow Cathedral. You've seen it twice in your life. The first time your father took you when you were 6, a Sunday walk, you and Tam, when Tam was still young enough to be dragged on Sunday walks. You remember the height of it, the way it sat at the top of the ridge, older than everything around it, indifferent to the industrial city that had grown up at its feet. The second time was Davy's funeral, when the minister from the parish spoke words at a graveside in the necropolis, and your father stood with his cap in both hands, and your mother's face did the thing it does, where she doesn't cry, and doesn't not cry, but instead exists in the space between. The necropolis is behind the cathedral on the hill. You can see it from certain streets if you're on high ground. The Victorian city of the dead, built above the Victorian city of the living, looking down. You've thought about this sometimes. The way Glasgow works vertically as well as horizontally. The grand streets up on the hills, the river trades down by the water, the slums in between. The necropolis up above everything, filled with the graves of people rich enough to afford monuments and the graves of people poor enough to share an unmarked section in the corner. Davy has a small stone. Not a monument, a small stone, grey sandstone, his name and dates. Your father paid for it himself, working 3 extra shifts to cover it, and never said a word about it. David James Dunbar, 1866 to 1872. 6 years. You go back inside. Agnes is awake again when you come back through, and this time she doesn't just look more alert, she looks like Agnes properly. The specific quality of her attention that is distinct from fever's abstracted gaze. Her eyes are clear. The particular brightness that illness puts in eyes is different from this. This is her own brightness, the kind that sees things. You put your hand to her forehead. Cooler. Not cold, not normal, but cooler than this morning. Measurably cooler. The kind of change you'd be afraid to trust, afraid to rely on, except that the coolness is steady under your hand, isn't the deceptive, brief coolness of a fever that has paused, but something more settled. Agnes watches your face while you do this. Better? She asks. Maybe. Maybe yes, or maybe not sure. Maybe yes. Agnes considers this. Then she asks to sit up, and you let her, arranging the blanket so her shoulders are covered, and she sits there in the bed with her back very straight. She has always sat very straight, even sick it's a thing about her. And she says, "Tell me what it's like outside." So you tell her. You tell her about the court and the wind from the west and the Henderson petticoat going up like a flag. You tell her about Mrs. Gillies and what she said about Sarah and warm and drink. You tell her about the sky, the iron filings grey, the darker smear to the northwest. She listens to all of this with the complete attention she gives to things she considers worth attending to. "I want to go to the Clyde," she says, "when you're better." "You always say when I'm better." "'Cause it's always when you're better," she accepts. This, but not completely. There's something in her face that is not quite resentment. Agnes doesn't quite do resentment. It doesn't fit her particular character, but is something like an awareness that being better might keep being a condition that remains just out of reach, and she is old enough to understand this, to have watched the way conditions work in this flat, in this building, in this city, where when things improve can be a phrase that means next month or next year or never. You sit on the edge of the bed. "I'll tell you about the river," you say, and you do. The Clyde, you tell her, is not a pretty river. You want to be honest about this because Agnes has a very good sense of when you're softening something, and she doesn't like it, and she'll call it out with the specific directness of a sick 8-year-old who has nothing to lose from honesty. The Clyde is not a pretty river. Not here, not in the city. Up north, up past the Falls of Clyde at Lanark, past the orchards and the market gardens of the upper valley. The river is something else entirely, clean, fast, cold, the kind of river you read about in poetry. Your grandmother talked about rivers like that. Rivers you could drink from. Rivers where you could see the bottom in 6 feet of water, see the stones and the weeds and the movement of fish. The Clyde, by the time it reaches Glasgow, has been used hard. It's been dammed and deepened and dredged. They've been dredging the Clyde since the 1770s, when it was too shallow for proper ships, and the merchants decided to change that and simply paid men to dig until the river was what they needed it to be. Now it's deep enough for ocean-going vessels, deep enough for the great iron ships that come sliding out of the yards at Govan and Partick on launch days. Huge dark hulls that move into the water with the slow grinding momentum that you can feel through the ground from 3 streets away. The river is brown, not mud brown, not the brown, of natural silt. Brown the way water gets when it has received the output of 1,000 industrial processes, the dye works and the chemical works and the bleach fields and the tanneries, all of them emptying themselves into the Clyde with the complete indifference of industry to consequence. Brown and iridescent in places, with a surface sheen that catches the grey light in colours that would be beautiful if you didn't know what they were. Agnes is listening with her eyes closed, which is how she listens best. You tell her about the sounds of the river. The deep thrum of a steam engine on a passing vessel, lower than you'd think, felt more than heard, a vibration that travels through the embankment stone and up through your feet if you stand close enough to the edge. The screech of iron on iron when the cranes are working at the quays, the shouts of the dockers. You've heard this from the bridge, not from the quayside. You've never been on the quayside, it's not a place for girls alone. The shouts of the dockers which carry further than you'd expect over water, individual words sometimes, more often just the tone of them, the working shouts that are language reduced to pure function. The smell of the river, you tell her, because she'll ask. The river smells of mud and industry and the faintly mineral cold of deep-moving water, and underneath that, especially at low tide when the banks show, the specific rich rottenness of river mud, which is not unpleasant in the way the court privy is unpleasant, but is more complex, more layered. Tidal mud contains history, your father says. It holds everything the river's ever carried, years and years of it pressed into silt, and the ships themselves. You tell her about the ships. Glasgow makes ships the way other cities make boots or cloth or bread. It's the central fact of the city's industrial identity. In the yards at Govan and Fairfield, and Napier's at Lancefield and half a dozen others along both banks, men work iron and steel into hulls that will carry passengers to New York, cargo to Bombay, emigrants to Australia, mail to every corner of the empire. Your father has been working the yards for 15 years. His hands can tell the difference between wrought iron and mild steel by feel in the dark without looking. He knows how a rivet should sound when it's set right versus when it's been rushed. A difference of maybe a half second in the striking. A difference you can't see but can hear. A difference that might, years from now, on the other side of an ocean, be the difference between a ship that holds and a ship that doesn't. He's never said this to you directly, but you've heard him say it to Tam in the tone he uses for things that actually matter. Agnes opens her eyes. "I want to see a ship launched," she says. "We'll go in the spring. Promise?" You think of all the things that stand between now and a ship launch in the spring, the winter to get through, the coal, Agnes's fever, your mother's arithmetic, the general nature of promises made in November, which are the most optimistic promises, offered into the furthest darkness. Promise, you say. Agnes closes her eyes again, satisfied, holding the promise like something tangible. You go back to the kitchen to check the fire. Your mother comes back at 11:30, slightly earlier than she said. You know from the way she opens the door, the specific quality of a door opened by someone who has news to manage, that something happened on the way or the way back. Your mother manages information the way she manages the household arithmetic. She processes it before presenting it, arrives with conclusions rather than raw data. She takes off the shawl, hangs it, puts the basket down on the table. Ran into Dr. Macaulay's boy, she says, on Rutherglen Road. Dr. Macaulay is not your doctor. You don't exactly have a doctor, the economics of having a personal doctor being what they are, but he's the closest approximation, a dispensary physician who works out of the Gorbals dispensary on Crown Street, which is a charitable institution funded partly by subscription from the better-off parts of the city, and partly by the fees patients pay when they can, which is not always. He said his father will be doing a round on the street this afternoon, your mother continues. He'll look in. You both understand what this means. It means your mother saw the Macaulay boy and said something to him. Or the Macaulay boy saw your mother and said something to her, and the result is that Dr. Macaulay will be passing and will look in, which is the way things work in this neighbourhood. Not formally, not through the channels that work in Langside or Pollokshields, but through the network of knowing and being known, through the fact that your mother has been living on or near this street for 15 years, and the Macaulay practice has been on Crown Street for 20. Good, you say. Your mother looks at you. A quick assessing look. How was she this morning? Cooler around 9. She ate all her porridge. The thing your mother's face does, which is not crying and not crying, she does it quickly, and then it's gone. Good girl, she says. Whether she means Agnes or you is not entirely clear. She ties on her apron, looks at the range. How's the coal? You show her the mark on your hand. She nods, makes a note of it in the household arithmetic of her head. Tam can fetch it this afternoon, she says, before the yard. Tell him. Tam is still in the box bed. It's nearly noon. You go through to the room where Agnes is now properly awake and sitting up with a Burns book open on her lap. She can read. You taught her last winter, slowly, with considerable patience and occasional frustration on both sides, and you knock on the frame of the box bed curtain. A sound from behind it. Mum says coal this afternoon. Before the yard, a longer sound. Tam. The curtain moves. Your brother's face appears. Tam is 17. He's been working the yard. A different yard from your father, the Springfield yard at Bridgeton, for 2 years, since he finished his 2 years at the parish school. He's got your father's build already, the broad shoulders beginning, the hands already going hard. But his face is still younger than the rest of him, still has the particular quality of someone who hasn't quite decided who they're going to be, hovering between the boy version and the man version, trying on different expressions like borrowed coats. He looks at you with the expression of someone who has been woken up earlier than planned and would like to register this fact. Coal, you say? This afternoon. I heard. Mum said. I heard, Morag. Agnes is watching from the bed with the book closed in her lap, taking notes, filing information. You go back to the kitchen. Dr. Macaulay arrives at 3 o'clock. He's a man of about 50 with a grey beard and the particular manner of someone who has spent 3 decades visiting rooms like this one. A manner that is neither pity nor indifference, but something more complicated. A kind of steady attention that doesn't flinch and doesn't perform. He carries his bag in his left hand. He takes off his hat at the door. Your mother shows him through to the room. You stand in the kitchen doorway, close enough to hear, but not in the way. This is the correct position. The position that says I am part of this household and have standing here without claiming adult authority, you don't technically have. You hear Dr. Macaulay's voice, low and even. You hear Agnes answer, 2 words, 3 words, her sentences tight with the effort of being assessed. You hear the specific sound of the stethoscope being placed, the brief silence of listening. Your mother's voice, asking something you can't quite make out. Dr. Macaulay again. Then he comes back through to the kitchen. Your mother follows. He sets his bag on the table and opens it. The lungs are clear, he says to your mother, but also you note to you. He's including you in the information, which is a courtesy not all of them extend. Which is the main thing. The fever is likely from a throat infection, nothing more serious. Your mother's face does the thing and then doesn't do it. She needs to stay warm and keep drinking, he says. She can eat anything she'll take. Keep her away from cold air for another few days. He takes out a small paper packet, sets it on the table. This is Dover's powder, a small dose in warm water at night if the fever rises again, not more than I've written here. He taps the packet, and not for more than 3 nights. Your mother is looking at the packet. She has the specific expression of someone calculating the cost of a thing against the necessity of the thing. What do I owe you? She says. Mrs. Dunbar. He waves the question away, not unkindly, not with the performance of charity either, without drama, the way you'd wave away a question that doesn't need asking right now. When Agnes is better, bring her to the dispensary for a proper examination. We'll settle it then. He picks up his bag, puts on his hat. At the door, he pauses. The damp, he says, not accusingly, just medically, the way you'd note a clinical factor. If there's any way to improve the ventilation, keep a window open during the day, even in cold weather, just a crack. It helps with respiratory illness in children. Fresh air. He leaves. You and your mother stand in the kitchen for a moment after the door closes. Then your mother picks up the Dover's powder packet and reads the writing on it. She reads slowly. She taught herself after she came to Glasgow, and she always looks like she's giving the words more than their due attention, pressing meaning out of them by concentration. She puts it on the shelf above the range next to the Burns. Window, she says, the glass in. The bottom pane is cracked. The top pane's whole. Open the top pane a crack tonight. The top pane is a small sash window, the kind that slides down from the top rather than up from the bottom, and you can open it about 3 inches before the swollen wood refuses to move further. 3 inches. Fresh air in 3-inch doses. Yes, you say. Good girl. She begins laying the table for dinner with the calm efficiency of a person who has received better news than expected and is converting the relief directly into action. Dinner is soup. Always soup when there's soup, which is most days, because soup is the most efficient use of almost anything, and your mother is a genius of efficiency in the way that people become geniuses of things they cannot afford to fail at. Today's soup is made from the remains of a mutton neck bone she's had simmering since morning, with onion and barley and 2 carrots she bought this morning from the market on Eglinton Street on her way back from Langside. The smell of it has been filling the kitchen for hours, the warm animal smell of bone broth, and by the time you sit down at the table, you and your mother, Agnes allowed up and sitting in the second chair wrapped in the blanket, Tam arrived from the coal merchant with coal dust still on his hands. By the time you sit down, that smell is the whole world. You say grace. Your mother says it quickly in the Scots way, the brief functional gratitude that asks nothing and expects nothing. but acknowledges that the soup is there and you are there, and those two facts coming together is not guaranteed. Then you eat. The soup is good. The barley has swollen and thickened the broth so it clings to the spoon. The mutton has come off the bone in soft grey threads. The carrot has dissolved at the edges, contributing its sweetness into the broth in a way that has no visual presence but is there in the flavour. Agnes eats slowly but completely. Tam eats the way Tam always eats, which is as though the bowl might be removed at any moment and he's racing an invisible opponent. His hands are still slightly grey at the knuckles despite washing. Coal dust gets into the creases. It takes more than a quick wash to shift. Is it good coal, you ask? It's coal, he shrugs. Better than what Mrs. Patterson used to sell us. Don't speak ill of the dead, your mother says, without looking up from her bowl. She's not dead. She moved to Motherwell. Close enough, your mother says. This is the only joke your mother makes regularly. Agnes has been laughing at it since she was 5. She doesn't laugh now. Her throat still hurts, but her face does something that is the shape of a laugh. This is the best moment of the day. You don't say so. You don't need to. Everyone at the table knows it. Soup when the fever is cooler, and Dr. Macaulay has said the lungs are clear and there's new coal in the bucket, and the wind is from the west, so the washing might actually drop. This is not a small day. This is, in the arithmetic of Bernard Street, a very good Thursday. You eat it slowly, on purpose, making it last. Your mother washes the bowls, you dry them. This is division of labour so established it requires no conversation, no agreement. You dry with the cloth that lives on the hook beside the range, which is always slightly damp but drier than the bowls, so the principle holds. Your mother washes quickly and thoroughly, the way she does everything, the way she washes the Henderson laundry. She has a single standard that applies to everything she touches, whether it matters to anyone else or not. Tam's out tonight, she says. I know. I'll need you to mind Agnes. I know. She hands you the last bowl, looks at her hands in the water. Her hands in water have a particular quality. They're roughened from the laundry work, red at the knuckles with small white lines where the skin cracks in cold weather and heals crooked. She rubs them, together under the surface the way you do when you're not quite washing your hands but not quite not washing them. She might ask you to go out, she says. Agnes. I'll take her to the end of the street. Just the end. Just the end. Your mother dries her own hands, looks at the window, at the last of the afternoon light going grey. Tomorrow, she says, if the fever's properly down, we'll take her to the Clyde. It takes a moment. Tomorrow, the Clyde. You made the promise this morning in the dark of the sick room with Agnes's eyes closed and the fever still on her, made it into the most uncertain air. And now your mother is saying tomorrow like it's a plan, a real plan, with the same matter-of-fact quality she uses for fetch the water and lay the fire. I promised her, you say. I know you did. Your mother folds the dishcloth, hangs it on its hook. I could hear through the wall. Agnes is asleep again by 7. The flat settles. Your mother in the box bed, the curtain, half drawn with the sound of breathing that becomes sleep's breathing so quickly and completely that you've always envied her it. Your father not home yet. The Fairfield yard runs late shifts in November. The light doesn't matter when you're working by lamp inside a hull, and the orders don't slow down for seasons. Tam went out at 6 without saying where, which means the same thing it always means, which is that he's 17 and the city is loud, and the flat is quiet, and the specific quietness of a flat where someone recently died is a different quiet from ordinary quiet, and Tam doesn't do well with quiet. You understand this. You don't hold it against him. But you notice it. You sit at the table in the kitchen with the lamp turned down low. You turn it down on principle, everything on principle. The oil has to last. And you let yourself be still for the first time today. Your hands are on the table in front of you. You look at them. The right hand, the palm, toughened. At the base of the fingers, where the pale handle sits, the mangle work, the ringing. The knuckles of the first and second finger cracked. The nail of your thumb, which broke last week catching on something, and has been snagging on everything since. The particular set of the wrist from years of carrying things, holding things, working things. Your left hand is softer by comparison. The hand you read with. The hand that held Agnes's forehead this morning to check the fever. You're 12 years old. You think about the girl who carried Agnes this morning. You did, briefly, shifted her in the bed when she needed shifting, your arms under her thin weight, and you think about the pails and the mangle and the 4 flights of stairs with the water and without, and the bread cut thin, and the porridge measured, and the coal noted on the back of your hand, and the laundry hung in the court in the cold, and the burns red in the dark sick room, and you think, what else is there to do? This is not self-pity. You don't experience it as self-pity. It's more like taking inventory, more like the mental habit you've learned from your mother, the counting, the arithmetic, the ledger that runs in your head. On one side, the things that have to be done. On the other side, you. And the calculation that makes those 2 sides balance is the only calculation that matters. The night sounds of Bernard Street come in through the crack in the window. The top pane, 3 inches, Dr. Macaulay's fresh air in cautious doses. The street at night sounds different from the street during the day. The working sounds are gone. The carts, the vendors, the specific percussion of a street engaged in the business of commerce and survival. What's left is the other city, the night city, the city that doesn't stop but changes register. From a close down the street, music, a fiddle, badly played, but enthusiastically, which almost counts as the same thing. The sound of a door opening, voices, mail from somewhere further up toward the salt market, the edge of argument or the edge of celebration. It's hard to tell from this distance. A baby crying somewhere in the building. 3rd floor, the McInnes family who have a new baby every 18 months with the clockwork reliability of a biological process nobody asked them about. The baby cries for 3 minutes and then stops. A cat in the court. The sound of your father's boots on the stair. You know his tread specifically, the weight and rhythm of it, the way the 3rd step sounds under him differently than under anyone else, because of how he distributes his weight when he's tired. He works long, and he comes home tired, with the specific tiredness of a man who has been hitting things with hammers for 12 hours in a cold yard by the river. And the stairs know him. The door. He comes in quietly, the way he always comes in when he knows the flat is sleeping. He's in the kitchen before he sees you at the table, and for a moment his face has the expression of a man caught off guard. Not alarmed, just unguarded. The face behind the face. Morag. He keeps his voice low. Da. He sits in the other chair. Sets his cap on the table. He smells of iron and coal smoke and the cold, and something sharper underneath. That's the river smell, the Clyde smell, that lives in the clothes of men who work the yards. He's been in it so long he doesn't smell it himself anymore. Agnes any better? Cooler tonight. Dr. Macaulay came. Your father's face. He looks at the table, At his hands, at the shelf where the Dover's powder sits next to the burns. What did he say? Throat infection. Lungs are clear. The lines around his eyes, which have been there as long as you can remember, deepen slightly. Not with more concern, with less. Good, he says. Good. He doesn't say anything else for a moment. He's still processing the shift from the yard to here, you think. The decompression that has to happen, the transition, from the noise and scale of the Fairfield yards to this kitchen, this lamp, this quiet. Then, cold at the yard today. Coal's running low. Tam fetched it. This afternoon. Your father nods, reaches into his coat pocket and puts his wages on the table between you. He does this every night, puts them on the table rather than keeping them in his pocket, a gesture that your mother reads every morning when she goes through the accounts. The gesture means, I am not Tam. I am not any version of the thing Tam might become. This is all of it, and it goes here. You look at the coins without counting them. That's your mother's job. Go to bed, Morag, your father says. I know. He's not dismissing you. He's telling you that he's here now, and that the things you were quietly presiding over, the lamp, the flat, the night sounds, Agnes's fever, he has them from here. You get up. At the door to the room, you pause. Mum said tomorrow we'll take Agnes to the Clyde, you say. If she's better. Your father picks up his cap, turns it in his hands the way he does when he's thinking. I'll come, he says, if the shift allows. You go to bed. Agnes is warm but not feverish when you slide in beside her. The top pane of the window is open 3 inches and the cold air comes in a thin thread above the sacking curtain. Not enough to chill the room, but enough to change the quality of it, to give the air a freshness that it doesn't have with everything closed. Agnes makes a sound in her sleep, shifts toward you the way she always does, the 8-year-old's instinct for warmth, her forehead finding the side of your arm. You lie still. The church at the top of the street strikes 9. You count the strokes because you always count them. 9. The evening still ahead for some people, the night already arrived for you. Outside, Glasgow goes on. The morning comes with rain. Not the uncertain rain of yesterday's grey sky, but the real thing. Steady and committed. The particular Glasgow rain that is neither dramatically stormy nor gently misty, but simply present. Industriously present. Doing the work of rain with the same steady application the city below it does its work. You hear it before you open your eyes. On the window, on the slates above, through the open crack in the top pane, the first thought, before the second thought catches up. The washing, the Henderson washing, on the line in the court. You're out of bed and pulling on your shoes before you're entirely conscious. Down the stairs, right side on the 12th step automatically, through the close into the court where the rain is falling straight down into the grey rectangle of space, and the Henderson shirts and the linens and the great offended petticoat are soaked through, heavy and dark on the line, all of last evening's drying undone in perhaps an hour. You stand in the court in your dress and apron with your hair unpinned and rain on your face, and you look at the washing. And you feel, not despair exactly, not even anger, something more functional than both, something that takes stock. The laundry will have to be dried inside. On the rack above the range and on the line strung between the 2 hooks, your mother drove into the kitchen wall 3 years ago specifically for this purpose. The kitchen will be full of damp laundry for the rest of the day. It will smell of wet cloth and steam. The flat will be more damp than usual, which is a medical observation Dr. Macaulay would not recommend. which is an irony so common in this kind of life that it barely registers as irony anymore. You start unpegging the washing. Your hands are wet immediately, the cold rain running down your wrists, soaking the cuffs of your dress. The fabric of the shirts is heavier than it should be, the linen cold and resistant in your hands. You work methodically, starting from the left, taking each peg and folding each piece as you go, not the way you would fold them if they were dry, properly, with a careful creasing that presents them well, but the emergency fold, the carry-inside fold, the fold that simply keeps them contained. The petticoat is an event. Wet, it weighs what feels like 40 pounds. It has achieved a kind of gravity, a relationship with the ground that's almost philosophical. You wrestle it off the line and fold it against your chest, and it soaks the front of your dress, and you carry the whole pile back inside and up the stairs, and you think, this is what the word laundress means in practice, not a romantic word, not a trade with romance in it, a word that means in all weathers, in all conditions, until the work is done. Your mother, when she comes through and sees the kitchen hung with wet laundry, and hears the rain on the window and sees your wet dress, makes a sound. It's a very small sound. It conveys in under a second that this was not unexpected, that the arithmetic has been adjusted, that a plan has been made. Change your dress, she says. I've only got the one other. Change it anyway. Hang the wet one over the chair. You change. The spare dress is slightly too short. You grew 2 inches since last spring, and nothing in the household budget has caught up with it yet. It makes you feel exposed at the ankles, which is a specific kind of discomfort, the discomfort of being the wrong size for what you have to wear. Agnes, your mother asks, still asleep. Cooler than last night, I think. Your mother looks at the window, at the rain. Not today for the river, she says. I know. Maybe Sunday. I told her I promised. I know you did. Your mother begins moving the laundry on the indoor rack, making space, hanging the wet pieces from outside. A promise isn't broken by rain. It's just delayed. The morning proceeds. Rain changes the flat. Rain changes the close and the court and the street. It changes the quality of everything, the way sound carries through the building, the way the light comes in. On a dry day, even a grey dry day, there's a certain amount of light that makes it through the gap above the sacking curtain. On a rain day, the light is different, flatter, more diffused, and the flat feels more thoroughly like what it is. A room and kitchen in a tenement building, on a street of tenement buildings, in a grid of streets in the densest urban neighbourhood in Scotland. You like rain days sometimes, not because of the washing, obviously, but because rain days change the pace. Rain slows the street. Rain means fewer errands, fewer reasons to navigate the close and the court and the standpipe queue with the particular alertness that outside requires. Rain days are interior days. You can be inside a rain day. Agnes wakes up at 8, and the fever is down, not gone, but down enough that when she sits up properly, both hands flat on the mattress, back straight. The Agnes posture that means she is present and intending to participate. Rain, she says, hearing it. Yes, not today for the river. Sunday, you say. Mum said Sunday. Agnes considers Sunday. Sunday is 3 days away, which to a sick 8-year-old is a geological period, an epoch. But she takes the information and files it in the specific place she keeps things she intends to hold people to. Sunday, she confirms. Sunday. She holds out her hand for the book. You read to her for an hour. Not just Burns this time. You run through Burns and then you do the one piece of the Bible you both like, which is Ruth. Because Ruth has the quality of a story as well as the quality of scripture, and the story of Ruth following Naomi across a strange country is a story that lands differently when you come from a family that walked to Glasgow from Sutherland. When you grow up knowing that your grandmother arrived in a city where no one knew her name, speaking a language that was already disappearing from her own mouth. Whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Agnes has this memorised. She mouths it along with you. Tam comes through the room at some point, ignoring both of you with the skilled indifference of a 17-year-old boy, and goes out into the rain in his work coat without a word. He doesn't like it when you read Ruth, Agnes observes. Tam doesn't like it when anyone does anything he didn't choose. He cried at Davy's funeral, Agnes says. You stop reading. Agnes looks at the window. Rain on grey glass. I saw him, she says. You were looking at the grave, but I was looking at people's faces. You don't say anything. He cried more than Dar, Agnes says. Dar didn't cry at all. Dar cries different, you say. Agnes thinks about this. The concept of people crying in different ways is something she's been assembling for a while, you can tell. She's been paying attention to this exact thing, the variety of grief, the different ways people carry things that are too heavy. How does he cry, she asks. He works, you say. Extra shifts. He worked 3 extra shifts to pay for the stone. Agnes is quiet for a moment. That's sad, she says. Yes, you say. It is. You go back to the book, but the mood has changed, thickened, and you close it after another page, and instead you sit on the edge of the bed and you talk, the way you rarely get to talk during the busy days, not reading, not working, not managing something, just talking. Agnes asks you questions. This is one of her dominant activities, asking questions, and the quality of her questions has always been discomforting in the specific way of a child who is more observant than the adults around them are quite comfortable with. She asks about the Henderson household. Are they kind, the Hendersons? Does Mum like going there? You say, they're fair. Your mother doesn't say much about them except professionally. The woman of the house has a good eye for laundry work, notices when it's been done properly, notices when it hasn't and says so. In both cases, which your mother considers fair. Agnes asks about the yard, the Fairfield yard where your father works. You tell her what you know, that it's on the south bank of the river at Govan, that it makes iron and steel ships, big ones, ocean-going vessels, that the work is done by men with specific trades, riveters, platers, caulkers, boiler makers, each responsible for a piece of the whole, none of them seeing the entire ship except from a distance. That the noise is enormous, your father says, though he barely notices it anymore because after 15 years it's just the sound of work. Agnes asks, do ships sink? You say, some do. Agnes thinks about this. The ships your father helps build, sailing out toward other countries, other oceans, carrying people who will never know who drove the rivets into the hull. If a ship sinks, she says carefully, is it Dar's fault? No, it's everyone's fault a little, or no one's. That's not a real answer. No, you agree. It's not. Agnes accepts this with the equanimity she applies to unsatisfactory answers, which is to say she accepts it but marks it as unresolved, a question still open to be returned to. The rain stops at about 2 in the afternoon. This is the nature of Glasgow rain. It commits completely and then stops, as though satisfied with the job done, and the streets emerge from it slightly washed, slightly worse, the cobbles darker, the closes dripping, the gutters running with everything. The rain has shifted from higher ground to lower. The air after Glasgow rain has a quality you can't quite describe to someone who hasn't been in it. It's cleaner than normal air. The smoke and the mill dust and the general industrial exhalation of a city of 300,000 have been pushed briefly toward the ground, settled. But it's not actually clean, it's Glasgow clean, which means cleaner than the baseline, which is still not what you'd call fresh. There's still coal and river and stone, but it's different. You notice it. You go out. Your mother has been inside all day, the kitchen full of hanging laundry, the range working hard to dry things. She needs errands run. She makes a list in her head and delivers it to you in the way she always delivers errands. Not as a list, but as a sequence, each thing pointing naturally to the next, a geographical logic. Bread, from the baker on Crown Street, the one your mother uses because he'll sell day-old at half price, and his day-old is still better than most people's fresh. Then to the coal merchant's boy to confirm the delivery for tomorrow. Not Tam's coal merchant, the other one on Rutherglen Road who charges 2 shillings less per hundredweight, and who your mother switched to after a careful calculation last spring. And if there's time, the apothecary for more of the linseed oil your mother puts in Agnes's chest. Rub when the cough settles in. You put on your coat, the only coat, the one with the button that needs resewing on the left side, the one you've been meaning to resew since October, and your boots and your shawl, and you go out. Bernard Street after rain is a specific landscape. The cobbles are wet and dark, and the gaps between them are filled with water that is not clean but is moving. Children from the building 2 doors down are doing the thing children do with puddles, which is a thing separate from and prior to all adult reasoning, the pure engagement with water in street that ignores cold, ignores wet shoes, ignores the fact that whatever's in the puddle is not just water. A cart has got stuck at the junction with Wallace Street, a heavy goods cart loaded with something covered in canvas, one wheel having found the deep rut where the cobbles are missing, and the clay below has been worked soft by months of wheel traffic. The horse, a bay with a patient expression and ribs slightly visible under the hide, is standing with its head down while 2 men argue about whether to push from the back or dig from under. A third man is giving advice from the pavement with the confidence of a man who has no responsibility for the outcome. You go around them. Crown Street is the main road through the Gorbals, the artery of it, wide enough for 2 carts to pass and a pedestrian to survive the encounter. It runs from the river down through the heart of the neighbourhood, and everything gravitates to it eventually. The shops, the dispensary, the pubs, the church, the people who have somewhere to be. The baker is Archie Fenn, who has been in the same shop on Crown Street since before you were born, and who is, your mother says, a decent man in the specific sense of a man who does what he says and sells what he claims to sell and doesn't water his flour. The last being apparently less guaranteed among bakers than you'd hope. The shop smells of the day's baking, slightly past its peak now in the afternoon, but still holding enough warmth and yeast sweetness to make you pause at the door. The smell of bread is the smell of possibility, of adequacy, of the day's arithmetic working out. You ask for day-old. Archie Fenn produces a loaf that is yesterday's, his yesterday's, which means it was made by 4 in the morning yesterday and sold through the day, and what's left is the last loaf, slightly flattened at one side where it's been leaning against another loaf in the basket. 6pence, he says, My mum usually pays 4p. That was before the flour price went up. He says it without heat, just as information. When did the flour price go up? October. You look at the loaf. You have 6p. You had planned to spend 4p on bread and 2p on the linseed oil. If you spend 6p on bread, you have nothing for the oil. I'll take it, you say. You take the bread. Outside, you stand on Crown Street with the loaf under your arm and recalculate the afternoon. You can do the coal merchant confirmation without money. That's just a message, a confirmation, a piece of information exchanged. The linseed oil will have to wait until tomorrow when your mother can come herself or can send you with more money. This is the daily texture of the arithmetic, not drama, just constant small adjustment. The household budget flexing to absorb the world's small surprises, the flour prices that go up in October and the rain that soaks the laundry, and the fever that arrives on a Monday. You go to the coal merchant's. The coal merchant's yard is down an alley off Rutherglen Road, and the yard itself is a dark and extraordinary place, a space completely black. The ground, the walls, the air, all of it covered in coal dust that has accreted over decades into a kind of mineral skin on every surface. The man who runs it, a Mr. Harkness, has a face the colour and texture of the yard itself, blackened into a permanent darkness that doesn't come off entirely even when he's clean, the dust worked into the lines of his face, his hands, the cartilage of his ears. He's a cheerful man, which seems improbable in the surroundings, but is one of those facts about people that reminds you not to draw conclusions from setting. Confirmation for tomorrow, you tell him. Dunbar, Bernard Street, 100 He writes it in the book. He uses a stub of chalk on the black cover of the book, white on black, the reverse of a normal ledger. Everything about the coal yard is the reverse of somewhere clean. Tell your mum the price is holding this week, he says. Next week I can't promise. I'll tell her. Good girl. You walk back toward Bernard Street. The way home takes you past the Clyde. Not quite. Bernard Street isn't on the river, it's 2 streets back. But if you go 2 minutes out of your way, down past the salt market to the embankment, you can see it. And today, with the rain stopped and the afternoon light doing something complicated with the cloud cover, you go 2 minutes out your way. The Clyde, it's high today. The rain has pushed it up, the brown water moving fast and flat, carrying everything the rain has washed into it from upstream. Straw, debris, things you don't examine too closely. On the surface, the light catches oddly, the iridescence your father mentioned once, the chemical colours of a river used hard. But also, and this is the thing you always think when you stand here, also, it's moving, always moving. The river doesn't stop, doesn't wait, doesn't worry about what it's carrying or where it's been. It just moves south and east, and eventually to the Firth and the sea. The ships at the quay are enormous up close. You've been this near to them before, a few times. On the few occasions when your father brought you on a Sunday and the quays were quiet enough. But you forget the size between visits, and it hits you again each time. The sheer vertical height of a ship's side. The way the hull curves up from the waterline, the rivets that your father helped place, hundreds of them, each one a small fist mark of iron. On one hull, a new one recently launched, still without its rigging and fittings, just the bare iron body. You can see the line of rivets running along a seam, thousands of them, each one placed by a man with a hammer. Each one struck precisely under the instruction of a man who knew the sound of a right strike and the sound of a wrong one. Your father. somewhere in this hull your father's hands. You think about the ship going to wherever it goes. Liverpool, New York, Calcutta, Sydney. Carrying the work of a man from Govan who coughs in November and comes home with coal dust in the creases of his hands and puts his wages on the kitchen table without ceremony. You think about the people who will sail on this ship, people who will never know his name, who will sit in a saloon or a third-class berth or a cargo hold and be held up by metal that someone on the Clyde decided to do properly. A man in a coat is walking along, the key toward you, and you notice, slightly too late to be graceful about it, that you're standing still on a working quay, staring at a ship with your bread under your arm, and your hem still slightly damp from the morning court visit, and the man is going to walk past and you're simply going to be there in his path. He does walk past. He doesn't look at you. You're invisible to him in the specific way that girls with bread under their arms on working quays are invisible to men in coats on their way somewhere. You go home. The afternoon moves. The evening comes. Agnes gets up for supper. This is the milestone, it sounds like. She gets up. She comes through to the kitchen. She sits at the table in her dress and the large shawl wrapped around her shoulders, and she looks at the room with the careful attention she's been stockpiling from the bed. She asks about the bread. She asks about the rain on the laundry. She asks what you saw at the quay. You tell her about the ship, the hull, the rivets. Her eyes go to your father at the end of the table and then back to you. "Does rivets?" she asks. "Some of them," your father says, not looking up from his bowl. "Which ones?" "Can't say from here." Agnes considers this. "Can you tell when you're working which ones you did and which ones someone else did?" Your father looks up. This is the question that penetrates the after-work quiet. He looks at Agnes, who is sitting up very straight in her large shawl waiting. "Yes," he says. "How?" "By the sound when you tap them, and by the look of the face, the mushroomed end. Each man has a way of finishing that's slightly different, like handwriting." Agnes considers this with the seriousness it deserves. "So the ship is full of handwriting," she says. Your father looks at his bowl, back at Agnes. "Aye," he says, "that's one way to put it." Your mother, after supper, sits at the table with the household ledger. This is the ledger that exists only in her head, but tonight she writes it out on a piece of paper with a pencil stub, which means the arithmetic is complicated enough to need external representation. You watch her do it without watching her directly, out of the corner of your attention while you wind the remaining yarn from the mending basket. She writes numbers, erases, writes again. The coal increase, flour increase, doctor's powder, 2 pennies, the bread at 6pence instead of 4. Against these, the laundry payment coming at the end of the week. Tam's wages, 3 shillings. Your father's wages from the extended shifts. You can't read the numbers from where you're sitting, but you can read the expression, the way her pencil moves. Short strokes mean subtraction. Longer strokes mean addition. The pause and the looking at the wall mean she's carrying something forward to the next week. She makes the pause and look twice. Then she folds the paper and puts it in the pocket of her apron and goes to bed. You stay up a little longer. You have a thing you do on nights when you're the last one awake, a habit so private you've never said it to anyone. You go to the window in the kitchen, not the sacking-covered window in the room, but the kitchen window which has whole glass in both panes, and you crack the top pane slightly, not for Dr. Macaulay's reasons, but for your own, and you look out. Bernard Street at this hour. The gas lamp at the top of the street is lit tonight. It throws a yellow circle on the wet cobbles, and in that circle, which is maybe 15 feet across, no more. The street is legible. You can see the stone of the opposite building, the dark rectangles of its windows, the line of its roofline against the less dark sky. Beyond the lamp's circle, darkness. But the darkness is not empty. You can hear it. A cart somewhere, late delivery or early departure, or someone with no respect for the hours. A laugh from a close down the street, high and brief. The distant, constant, industrial murmur of the city that never entirely quiets, the furnaces that run all night, the gasworks that never stop, the machinery of a city that has decided to be productive at all hours. Glasgow doesn't sleep. You've heard your father say this, usually as a complaint, about the noise, about the light from the yards that you can see from the hill on a clear night, orange smears on the sky south of the river. But there's something else in the way he says it too, something that isn't complaint, something more like a grudging recognition. The city that doesn't sleep makes the ships that cross the world. The city that doesn't sleep is what it is, for better and worse, in all its impossible density and noise and production and suffering and ordinary life, because it doesn't stop. You are part of it. 12 years old in a room and kitchen on Bernard Street, with cracked knuckles and a right shoulder that carries more than the left, with a sister who is getting better and a brother who doesn't know how to be sad without motion, and a mother who counts in her sleep, and a father whose handwriting is in the hull of a ship you saw today at the quay. You're as much a part of Glasgow as any of it. Sunday comes, 3 days of interior life, the flat, the court, the standpipe, the mangle, the range, the laundry, and then Sunday comes, and your mother ties on her good shawl, and your father puts on his good coat, and Agnes, whose fever broke properly on Saturday morning with the specific drama of a fever breaking, Agnes dressed and straight-backed and ready, and you in your coat with the button resewn at last. You did it Thursday evening finally, with the thick needle and the good thread, the button sitting properly now, the coat closed against the November air. You go to the Clyde, all 4 of you. Tam is still in bed when you leave, and nobody argues about it. The morning is cold and dry, and the sky has the particular pale winter clarity that Glasgow gets sometimes when the wind comes from the north and pushes the smoke from the furnaces briefly sideways, and you can see further than usual, see the definition of things that normally blur into smoke. Down Bernard Street, across the Salt Market, down to the embankment, and there it is. Agnes, who has been walking very correctly between you and your mother, with the deliberate gait of a person conserving energy, and also demonstrating that they are well enough to be here. Agnes stops. She looks at the river. You watch her look. The Clyde this morning is doing something particular with the light. The sun is low, coming in from the east, hitting the water at an angle that makes the surface catch and release, the movement of the river visible in the light the way it's not visible in cloud. Browns and iridescent colours and the cold, clean shimmer of moving water. A ship is moving downstream, not large. A river vessel, a steamlighter carrying cargo toward the estuary. The smoke from its stack goes up straight in the still air. It's enormous, Agnes says. She means the river generally, the width of it here, the sense of its scale. It goes to the sea, you tell her, eventually, past Greenock, past Gourock, out into the Firth, and from the Firth, the North Atlantic. Agnes watches the lighter until it rounds the bend at the next quay. Where is the North Atlantic, she asks. Your father has been standing slightly apart, looking at the yards across the river. The Fairfield yard visible from here? the cranes, the frames of ships in various stages of construction, rising above the yard wall like the bones of giant things. He looks over when Agnes asks. "West," he says. "Just keep going west. You can't miss it." Agnes looks west, down the river, toward the sea that is 40 miles away, and the ocean that is beyond that, and the world that is beyond that. "I want to go on a ship some day," she says. "Where to?" your father asks. Agnes thinks about this with real seriousness. "Somewhere there isn't smoke," she says. Your father laughs. Not the short exhalation he gave you the week before. A real laugh, a full one, brief but genuine, with a quality of surprise. Surprised by Agnes, surprised by his own laughing, surprised by the morning. Your mother smiles. You watch her smile the way Agnes watches everything, quietly taking notes. You stand on the embankment of the Clyde on a clear November morning, the four of you, and the river goes past, brown and iridescent and alive with its own purposes, carrying whatever it carries toward the sea. The walk back is slower than the walk out. The way walks back always are, not from tiredness, though Agnes is tiring, but from the change of relationship with the route. Going out, you're moving towards something. Coming back, you're moving through something already known. Agnes holds your hand on the way back. She doesn't usually. She's 8 and considers herself past hand-holding as a default position. But on the return from the Clyde, her hand finds yours without ceremony and holds on, and you walk together through the salt market and up toward Bernard Street, with her small hard hand in your cracked larger one. She doesn't say anything. You don't either. That night, late, after the flat has gone to sleep, you do the thing at the kitchen window again. Only this time you think about the river, the way it goes west, the way Agnes looked west along it with a kind of hunger that isn't quite hope and isn't quite wanting. More like the acknowledgement that the world is larger than Bernard Street, larger than Glasgow, larger than the column of smoke from the Fairfield Yards furnaces. The acknowledgement of a girl who has been confined to a sick room for a week and who has now stood on an embankment and looked at moving water going somewhere. You're 12. In 6 years you'll be 18, which in 1872 Glasgow is not young. In 6 years you could be doing your mother's work, or a version of it. Taking in laundry, working one of the mills further up the Clyde, the cotton mills at Katrine, the thread mills at Paisley, the mills at Greenock. The city has work for everyone who is willing to stand in it long enough. In 6 years, Agnes will be 14. You think about Agnes at 14. The directness of her, the attention, the quality of her questions about ships and handwriting and where the North Atlantic is. What will the city make of Agnes? You're not sure. But you're fairly certain that whatever it makes of her, she'll notice everything it does from beginning to end, and she'll ask exactly the right questions about it, and the city for once will have to answer. The lamp oil is almost gone. You turn the wick down until the light is barely aglow, the warmest possible near dark. Outside, Glasgow continues. The furnaces across the river running through the night, the orange smear on the northern sky that is the gasworks, the sound of a cart on the distant cobbles, the close sounds of a building full of sleeping people, the breathing of 36 lives, all of them above you and below you and beside you, all of them doing the thing that living things do at this hour, which is simply continuing. You think about the river, the way it moves, the way the light catches the surface and releases it, catches and releases, as though the river is considering each piece of light and letting it go, the way it doesn't stop, the way it carries everything forward, The dye works and the tanneries and the ship hulls and the rain from Tuesday and the sewage from 1,000 privies, and also, running underneath all of that, beneath all the industrial damage and the city's heavy use, the original cold, clear water from the hills, the water that was here before the city that will be here after it. The river doesn't care what it carries. It goes west anyway. It finds the sea. Your mother counts in her sleep. Your father's handwriting is in ships. Agnes asks the right questions. Tam runs from quiet into noise and back again, and one day he'll figure out the distance between those two things, and until then you'll cut 4 pieces of bread in case he comes home, and you, 12 years old, the right shoulder harder than the left, the palms calloused, the 12th step taken on the right side. You're learning the city the way the city teaches itself, not through instruction, not through deliberate education, but through repetition and necessity and the accumulated weight of ordinary days. This is what growing up means in 1872 in the Gorbals, in a room and kitchen on Bernard Street. Not a single dramatic transformation, not a moment of clarity where everything comes different. Just this, the daily accumulation of knowing, the water pails and the mangle and the bread cut thin and the forehead checked for fever and the burns read in the dark, day after day, season after season, until one morning you wake up and you are not the girl who arrived in her own life not knowing the streets. You are the street. You know the 12th step and the coal merchant's price and the particular cry of the McInnes baby and the quality of the river light on a clear November morning. You become, in increments so small they're invisible in the moment exactly where you are. The lamp gutters. You turn it off. The darkness is complete for a moment, then not. The faint light from the gas lamp at the top of the street pushing through the kitchen window. A yellow ghost, enough to see the shapes of things. You go to bed. Agnes is warm and still, not feverish warm. Just warm. The settled warmth of a body doing well. The warmth that means the arithmetic has come out right today. You slide in beside her and she doesn't wake, just adjusts the small automatic movement toward company that means she's sleeping well and knows, even in sleep, that you're back. You close your eyes, the sounds of the building come in, filtered through, the floor and the walls and the gap in the top window, the McInnes baby quiet tonight, the building breathing, the city beyond it breathing harder, the river beyond that not breathing at all but moving, always moving, indifferent and unstoppable, west toward the sea. Your shoulder aches pleasantly, the right one, the way it does at the end of a full day. Your hands are at rest. The 12th step is waiting for tomorrow. The washboard, the mangle, the coal bucket, the porridge measured carefully. They will all be there tomorrow, and you will rise before the light, and you will do all of it again and again and again, the repetition that is not monotony, but is instead the deep structure of a life being built, one grey November morning at a time in the second city of the empire, in the densest neighbourhood in Scotland, in a room with damp on the walls and burns on the shelf and the sound of the Clyde in the distance if you know how to listen. The church at the top of the street strikes 10. You count the strokes. You are warm enough. You are safe enough. You are here enough. Agnes breathes beside you, slow and steady. The breathing of someone who has turned from fever toward morning, who is moving toward Sunday and the river and ships full of handwriting, one small regular breath at a time. And in the building around you, 36 lives breathe in and breathe out, each one a separate arithmetic, each one its own weight of hope and difficulty and ordinary Tuesday. all of them stacked in 4 floors of Glasgow stone above the same wet earth, and above all of you, the winter sky. And somewhere in that sky, past the coal smoke and the gasworks glow, and the clouds coming in from the North Atlantic, somewhere up there, the same stars that your grandmother watched from Sutherland before she walked to the city, the same stars. Some things don't change. Let sleep come. Let it rise up through the floorboards the way cold does, the way sound does, gentle and pervasive, filling the room from below. Let the day slow. Let the arithmetic in your head grow quiet. The coal and the bread and the weather and the wages. Let it all go still, just for now, just until morning. You've earned this. Agnes breathes. Glasgow breathes. The river goes west. And you, Morag Dunbar, 12 years old, Bernard Street, the Gorbals, Glasgow, Scotland, 1872. You sink into the dark the way the city sinks into its river, the way the river sinks into the firth, the way the firth opens into the sea, soft, down, still. The last thing is the sound of the river, imagined or remembered, the same sound carrying everything forward. Then nothing, just rest, just the long, slow drift. Good night.